being a man, it's not based upon how fast you run, how strong you are, how well you can shoot. It's based upon your character.
This is the Construction Veteran Podcast.
Construction Veterans Podcast.
Connecting and celebrating veterans in construction. Now, here's your host, Scott Friend.
After a long and much-needed break, I'm Scott Friend. Welcome back to the Construction Veteran. I'm excited to bring to you guys Bill McDonald, a tenured Army Special Operations soldier. Let's dig into it. Hey, Bill, how are you, sir?
I'm awesome, Scott. Happy to be here.
Awesome. I love it, man. Starting off with the motivation. So Bill and I have a mutual contact in the industry, and he felt like Bill would be a good guest on the show. And I've gotten to know him a little bit over email and prior to recording the show, and I'm excited to bring your story to everybody. So I want to talk real quick, Bill. Where are you from, and tell me a little bit about your service background.
All right. Well, I'm going to caveat this by saying I'm not necessarily proud of where I'm from per se, but because it's changed a lot. But I'm from California originally.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah, we're cutting the recording now.
Yeah, a beautiful state, man. It's there's just the state itself. Topography is beautiful, but it's changed so much that I don't live there anymore, and neither does my family. But it's it was nice while we were there. As far as my service background, I spent 31 years in the military, 20 years enlisted, and 11 years as an officer. And I checked almost every block in those 31 years. I was enlisted, started out as an E1, got up to E8, transitioned over to be officer, direct commissioned, and then I got out as a major. And I spent some time active duty, some time in the Guard, and some time in the reserves. And I was a Special Forces qualified soldier. I was a 18 Delta and an 18 Charlie. 18 Delta is a Special Forces medic, and 18 Charlie is a Special Forces engineer. And I crossed over, and I was a civil affairs officer, and that's what I retired at. I do have several other MOSs in there, specialties, but those are the primary ones. And yeah, it was great. Initially, just to throw this out there for those people that are in the reserve components, when I first went in the reserves or the Guard, I had certain assumptions about it, but I am very glad that I was able to experience the reserves and the Guard, because it actually allowed me to understand how those military members can complement what active duty does and the value that they have. And it's often underestimated and misunderstood. So I'm thankful for that experience.
Yeah, very cool. You're actually the second civil affairs major I've had on. I had Ryan Brentz on. I don't know if that name rings a bell or if you guys ever ran across each other, but I had him on as a guest last year. It's a very unique community that isn't talked about too much in outside of special operations. So it's a neat role. Can you? A lot of people know about what SF is, but can you talk to me about what civil affairs is, real quick?
Yeah, it's interesting because most people they talk smack about civil affairs, like they don't really understand what a civil affairs officer does. But civil affairs, they're really masters at building rapport and establishing trust. And so, they go in, and it used to be back in the 90s and before that, where civil affairs teams were made up of special forces guys. Like it was a rotation. If when you left the team just to take a break for a little bit, you'd go into a special forces team, and then they took them away, and then they transitioned to where it's civil affairs. They split it in half, and it's some for special forces and some for the regular Army component. But I always tell people, if you want to go into business or international relations, or you just want to understand people and you want to be a good leader and manager, civil affairs officer is a way to go. because you're constantly interacting with local nationals, people of high positions in the government, in both the United States government, if you go on certain missions, as well as foreign governments. It's very unique, but man, does it really help develop some personal skills.
Yeah, very cool. And so let's talk about what you're doing now, man. You've only been out of the reserves, correct me if I'm wrong, since 2022. Is that right?
Yeah, January 18th, 2022.
Very cool. And when did you transition off active duty?
The last time I transitioned off of active duty was 2006, actually.
Okay. So, and that was straight to the guard after that?
Yeah.
Very cool. So you've had, you're like the Renaissance man in special operations for sure.
Yeah.
Did you, so when you transitioned off active duty, we'll get into what you're doing now, but did you get into your current role after that? Or did you kind of bounce around, do a couple different things?
No, I did what a lot of special operations guys did. I did some contracting, and actually, my active duty and guard time went back and forth. So, because I originally got out in 2001, and then went back in, and then got out. So what I did initially when I got off of active duty in my first contracting job was I was the co-director of the Afghan Secret Service. I'm sorry, I was on the personal protection detail for Karzai, Hamid Karzai. He's the guy we put into power in
Yeah.
2001. And I was on that detail, and then I later became the co-director of his Secret Service. I was appointed by the State Department. Very interesting gig. And then when I came back home, I pursued my other passion, which is health and fitness. I used to train athletes for a living in San Diego, and then I got hurt, and that's a whole nother story. And then so I couldn't train athletes because I used to train with my athletes, which is a little different. I didn't tell them what to do; I did everything with them. So in San Diego, I trained triathletes, and I trained marathon runners, and some CrossFitters, and some corporate executives. And then I got hurt, and I had some malpractice. It was done to me and rendered me I was classified as an amputee. There's a story behind that as well. And so I couldn't do that profession anymore. And at the same time that all that happened, I was offered a job to teach for a 3-letter agency in Virginia. And they didn't care that I was doing physical therapy and that I was going through surgeries and all this stuff. As long as I could teach, they said they welcomed me. So I came to Virginia. I taught for 8 years, almost 10,000 students, and it was kind of a toxic environment. So I was really looking for something else to do. And at the same time, I was trying to do some coaching as well. Executive coaching, I have done that. I've got a lot of training and education in that. But at the time, it really wasn't paying the bills. It's a tough market to get into. And so I just wanted to transition into another career field where I could leverage my leadership and rapport building and experience. And that's how I got into this industry. If you want details on exactly how that happened, I mean, I can tell you, but bottom line is I was looking last October for a different thing to do that would leverage my skills that was outside of anything that had to do with government.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So you stumbled upon what you're doing now. Let's discuss kind of how we got introduced and what you're doing in relation to the construction industry. What is it that you do?
So I'm a consultant for lean construction and the last planner system. And originally, around September, October, a very good friend of mine that I've known for like 25 years, he was involved in lean construction. And he said, "Hey, I think we have some openings, Bill. Let me get you in contact with like the director, and he'll interview you, and maybe if it's a good fit, then you know you can come out here, and I don't know what the details are. And I said, okay, well, what exactly do you do? And he gave me kind of a vague description about problem solving and things like that and planning, but it wasn't exactly super clear. And so I said, well, and he's an 18 Charlie too. He's a special force engineer. I'm like, all right, well, I'm a Charlie and I'm an engineer and I know basic construction, but man, you're talking about the commercial level. That's way above my pay grade. And he goes, trust me, your experience in special forces planning, it's exactly what they need. And especially since you're an officer. Now, he was enlisted. We were enlisted together. He got out as enlisted, I think E7 or E8. And so I said, well, I'm willing to explore it. I'm willing to find out more information. And the guy that he connected me with was another former special forces guy that had retired as a team sergeant. And he gave me a better explanation. And so I spoke with him, and we, talked about, well, there's a lack of good structure and planning. The construction industry. You there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, well, I don't know what happened. My screen just went dark. Sorry about that. And so he went. So he says, they're behind the timeline, and they're usually over budget. There's usually not a very good communication. He said, so your experience in special forces as a civil affairs officer has a direct correlation to what the industry is missing. And I'm like, okay, all right. So we did that interview, and then at the same time, I got another job offer, and I had to take it. And so I took it, and I went overseas for a little bit, but I never heard back from this guy. And so I'm like, okay, well, and I'm a very direct guy. So whenever I'm done with like an interview process, I just straight up ask the question, is there any reason that you can see after the interview or whatever the interaction is that you wouldn't hire me or offer me a job? And he said, no, not at all. I mean, yeah, you're exactly what I'm looking for. I said, okay, great. But he didn't call me back. I took this other job overseas, but it was some unethical business practices. So I left that job, came back to the States, and I was looking for something again outside of the government. And I get a call from this guy. So I think it'd been 5, maybe 6 months. And he said, hey, Bill, it's so-and-so. And I'm like, oh, hey, how's it going? He goes, yeah, man, I got to apologize to you. I'm sorry I ghosted you. It wasn't intentional, but that company, I had the feeling that I was going to be leaving the company. And I didn't want to bring you into the company knowing that I was leaving and that there was possibly some issues. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, all right. He goes, but I have another opportunity. It's with this other Marine Corps captain that has got this construction background, and sees a need in the industry, and he's going to start his own company. And he asked me if I was available, but I've got a really good gig with another company. And I wasn't ready to leave it, but I told him I knew exactly who he should talk to. And so he said, can I give you his number or your number? And I said, yeah, by all means. And so that was how I was introduced to Andrew and his company, Industrialized Construction Partners, or IC Partners. And that's how I got into the industry.
Well, I speak for the industry, man. We're lucky to have a guy of your caliber. So I'm glad you find your way. And I'm sure, I know you hadn't been in this gig for too long, but I'm sure you're already seeing some parallels between the service and the construction industry for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've developed this skill of looking at a situation or circumstance and then just translating it into experience that I've had, or vice versa. Um, And so, yeah, I've definitely been able to, although I was a little hesitant to step into the industry, since I've been in the industry, I have enjoyed it immensely, and I have been able to provide quite a bit of value. And well, those guys were right. Those two SF guys were right that my skill set translates nicely to
Yeah.
the industry. So,
Yeah, for sure. So, so what was it like? What made you realize, okay, this is a good fit? Seeing your background, I mean, that's a drastic change. Getting into construction, I'm sure you came with maybe some misconceptions about what construction might be, and like you said, what the heck is lean, and we can talk about that a little bit. So, what was that transition like? I mean, what made you feel comfortable making that jump into this industry?
well, first, um, sometimes we have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. So I had the interview, and and obviously he had my resume, looked at my background, and everything, and he explained to me that some of the problems and the issues, like being behind schedule and over budget, and having poor communication and things like that. I'm like, yep, I totally understand that stuff, and I study cognitive behavior as a hobby, and um, put those things into practice, and I've taught over 15,000 students in my lifetime, probably closer to 20. So one, I thought, well, kind of sounds to me like this is just a variation of teaching. It's improvement, right? It's systems and organization and structure and things like that. So I'm like, all right, I could do that. But the final interview step was to fly me to Texas and put me in front of 5 industry professionals and put me in a make pool planning session. You know what a pool planning session is, right? A face plan
Yeah,
session.
yeah. Can we sidetrack real quick and kind of talk about what that is, and a little bit about Last Planner?
Yeah. So the last planner system is a system that was designed to optimize planning or make planning more efficient for the construction industry. And it implements something called backwards planning. And backwards planning is foreign to a lot of the corporate world because most of the corporate world does forwards planning, which is what most people are familiar with. But backwards planning is how special operations plans their missions. And so I had 26 years of experience doing backwards planning. We do that as a civil affairs and civil affairs too. And so you start at a milestone. So you identify a milestone in the future. It can be 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, but uh, in some parts of the industry, 6 weeks is kind of standard, knowing that it's hard to plan and predict things that happen too far in the future because you have weather and all kinds of other issues, right? But you identify a milestone and then you begin to plan from the point of the milestone 6 weeks in the future back to today. And so when some people have never heard of it hear about it, they're like, this doesn't even make sense. There's no way we can predict what goes on in 6 weeks from now. And that's not the point. The point is we're going to plan this as if nothing were to happen in the next 6 weeks. And then as we do that, we will begin to identify problems. It's what I tell a lot of people is if you just trust the process, then what we're going to figure out is that this method of planning allows us to identify problems early and often. And when you forward plan in the construction industry and other industries as well, there's a tendency to run right into a problem, like hit a pothole. And then they're like, okay, now what do I do? How do I deal with this pothole? And it takes time and it takes money, which then costs other issues for the project. And if you do backwards planning or LPS, last planner system, correctly, you can identify a potential problem, 3 or 4 weeks in advance. And my experience is you can mitigate those problems that you experience up to 70 or 80% of the time. Um, so it's really incredible. And when people really learn it, they go, oh my gosh, like, why haven't we done this before? unfortunately, there's a large percentage of people that are getting taught LPS in the wrong or the less efficient and less effective way. Is that good, or do you want me to explain more about it?
No, that's perfect. And I think so. I've been off active duty since 2011, and I've seen the change happen where a lot more people are adopting that system. And to me, when it was getting bigger, I'm going, well, this just makes sense. Like this is the way we should do things. What am I not going to do today that's going to impact me 6 weeks in the future on the job site? Or what do I need to do today to make sure that that's successful? I guess is a good way to put it. Um, so it's neat seeing that it's gotten so much traction over the last decade plus, to where I'm seeing the industry it's becoming the norm now. That's just kind of the way we plan and the way we're supposed to plan. But I sidetracked you. I'm sorry. So we were talking about the parallels between what you saw and kind of what made you comfortable getting into this.
Yeah, so to go back to that, they told me what they were going to do, and I don't know. I think most most normal people would have been like, "Are you kidding me? Like, no way! I'm not going to stand in front of 5 industry professionals and go through some mock thing when I didn't come from this industry to begin with. Like, what?" But I don't really have a problem. I'm comfortable being uncomfortable, and I don't have a problem being on stage and talking and things like that. So I said, "All right, well, I'll take the challenge." And so they brought me in this conference room in Dallas, Texas. I met these 5 guys that didn't know me and I didn't know them. Well, that's not true because Andrew was one of them, and we'd had plenty of conversations. And the other SF gentleman was one of them as well. And they're like, okay. So they gave me, a basic blurb on a project, like, hey, you've got this $130 million high school that's being built, and, the groundwork's already been done and the foundation's already been done, and we're going erect, and, you've got the steel guy and this and that. And, I understood some of these terms and some of the concepts, but I'm like, okay, there's definitely some things that I'm 100% familiar with. I'm like, okay, all right, I'm listening. And then, hey, we have got to, we've lost some time. We've lost like a month, and these are some of the issues and stuff. And hey, you're the one that's leading this meeting with your trade partners, and you got to get them back on track, and you got to deal with some of the issues that you might encounter. And I'm like, oh, okay, all righty. All right, let's start. And so I stumbled initially through the first little bit, but then I got into whatever you want to call it, the zone. I got into the zone, and I'm really good at focusing on solutions. One, and I'm really good at reframing things, and I'm really good at redirecting people's efforts and their focus. And so, for example, they threw at me some attitudes that, you might get from a steel guy or framer. Oh, hold on a second. Oh, my bad on that. See if I can go back and make this flow. All right. So, oh man, lost my train of thought, Scott.
No, you. I'll let it
Look
know
at
that.
I thought I'd turned all my alarms off and everything. So, all right,
You're good.
let's try this again. So they threw some attitudes at me, and then I just dealt with the attitudes, and I didn't give the attitudes back because, again, one of the things that I do with all the projects that I work on is I talk about rapport building, and I talk to them about team building and everything else. We can get into that in a minute, in a few minutes, but anyway, so they just kept throwing problems at me, and even throwing terms that at the time I didn't even really truly understand. Like, 'cause at the time I didn't really truly understand what a slab on grade was, or the difference between a pile and a pier. And so, but I knew the general thing, like, okay, you have a problem. I understand. We have a timeline. We have to get this done. I'm like, so let's focus on the solution, and let's focus on this. And by the time I got done, they all said, "You did an incredible job, Bill." It's like, dude, you make a great superintendent. I'm like, what? Oh, all right, cool, thanks. And so that gave me some confidence. That whole situation, and that um, I mean, you can call it a rehearsal, right? Because that's what we would call it, special forces, I guess. But yeah. After that, I'm like, okay, all right, sure. If you're telling me that I did a fairly good job, and great. So then I just shadowed Andrew on a couple projects, and he introduced me, and then I started talking to guys about problems and identifying solutions.
Yeah, I think I would liken it to what civil affairs does. I mean, a lot of what we do, like I'll give you an example. I'm not an expert at any of the trades. I mean, I'm a carpenter by trade, but I'm not an expert at any of these trades. A lot of it is just relationship building,
Mhm.
trusting the team to execute, and I'm just laying the groundwork like, okay, here's the plan and showing them what's on the horizon, what has to be done. But I've likened the trades before to like a warrant officer. So these guys are like I would be like the BC. So I'm kind of given the commands of here's what we need to do, but I'm leaning on these guys as the experts in their individual fields. And so I think sometimes we overcomplicate the industry where it really does just boil down to trust and building those relationships. Because I'm not going to build the job myself. I can't. I mean, physically as one man, yes, but I can't do all these things. I don't have all the trade expertise. Um, so I think it fits you well, man, and I'm really glad you found your fit in the industry. Um, so
Thanks.
if you were to go back, maybe when you were transitioning out or looking for work, um, do you think maybe that you would have followed the same journey back into this industry and tried to find your way, or was it just kind of a fluke and it fell in your lap?
If I went back, well, I mean, I think it's a cool industry, um, but I mean, I kind of followed the path that I wanted to follow. Um, I'm happy to be where I'm at right now, and I believe God sets us on a specific path for a reason. We experience certain things, whether they're painful or they're difficult, or they're not painful and they're not difficult. But so would I do things over again? No, I think I'm here at the time. I'm here for a reason. There's definitely a need, and I'm being successful and welcomed. So, um, so I'm not so sure if I would have changed it, because then I wouldn't have had the other experiences I had. Right. So,
Yeah, no, that's fair. I don't think there's really any right or wrong answer to that. I'm just curious. Um, so I know I've stated what I think, what attributes that you carried over, but what do you think really stands out that you've brought to this industry that you learned during your time in SF and civil affairs?
well, I liken being in this industry and working with trade partners or going on different projects as like a FID mission. So, movies are movies, and what you usually see in a movie, except for maybe the original, you know, Green Beret movie that had John Wayne in it, is, we all go fight terrorists and this and that. But, SF's Special Forces primary mission has largely been foreign internal defense across the world for, since its inception, with the exception of, yes, we have 7 different missions and direct actions, one counterterrorism's one, and counterinsurgency. But the bottom line is, you know, a lot of this training in foreign countries is what we do. So we're teachers, we're instructors. Um, and going to a new job site and working with different trade partners is kind of like that, which means you can't use the same exact technique everywhere. And the culture is going to be slightly different depending upon where you go. Like, construction workers in Philly aren't going to be the same as construction workers in Texas. And so if you aren't aware of your surroundings and you can't pick up on and identify the nuances and difference in the methods of communication, in um, the way that they think of things, and you can't adjust, well, then you're not going to be as successful as you could be. So I have a lot of experience with that, both in civil affairs and special forces. Working, I've been to 47 countries. I think I've operated like was in the military in, I think, 19 of those 47 countries. And so I've met some, some superintendents and some other old school guys, because I'm in my 50s. So it's not like um, I'm in my 50s, but I look a lot younger. Another one of the reasons why Andrew liked me, because of that. But anyway, they're set in their ways and they're not going to change. So they are who they are, and they're just going to do what they do. And unfortunately, that doesn't always work the best, and so then there's friction that's unnecessary, right? So that's one. Two is, I'm a solutions focused person, and I understand the nuances of perspectives and the words we use. And so I can key in on that, and I can help redirect people. And I'll tell you a quick story. And that's one of the superintendents I was working with. Great guy, former Marine and former SF guy. He was superintendent. And when we first started working together, he would say, "All right, everybody, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. My name's so and so. And I just want everyone to know that I am really aggressive when it comes to this type of stuff. I'm really aggressive about meeting timelines and the project and doing good work." And he says this, and for about the third time, I said, "Hey, can we just pause for a second?" And he said, "Yeah, Bill, by all means." I said, "Let's talk about the words that we use when we're communicating with teams, um, because sometimes the words make the difference in the relationship and the way we're perceived." And he's like, "Okay, yeah, what you got?" And I said, "Well, I know you don't mean anything negative by it, but you like to start these meetings out with, I'm aggressive when I come to this and that and everything else, and you pretty much have a room full of men in here that are all the different tradesmen, foremen, and things like that. And if it's not a conscious thing, it's a subconscious thing. It kind of raises or heightens their sense. There's just that word in general, a little defensive, a little like what, it causes this subtle shift that's not a positive shift in human behavior. And so it goes, "Whoa, I don't mean anything by, like, I'm not." I said, I know you're just passionate about your work, right? You're passionate about, yeah, that's it, man. I'm passionate." And like, so if we change the word to something else, doesn't have to be passionate, then you won't immediately get these guys in a heightened state. And then about like 3 minutes later, the rest of his staff goes, "Yeah, we agree with Bill." And he said, "Well, why didn't you say anything to me? Like, why did you guys tell me?" And of course, most people don't want to ruffle the feathers of the boss or the guy they work for, or things like that, right? So they're not necessarily willing to say anything. Um, so I can identify that stuff and communicate it in a non-abrasive way and get guys to change and adjust to make the relationships they have better. And then I just talk to them about specific points. So I know I kind of went off on a little tangent, but it's my experience working with a bunch of different people in different countries across cultural barriers and language barriers that's allowed me to be able to step into an environment and um, assess it and then adjust my approach so that I can actually build rapport and trust there. And I understand bridging trust, which is something that's eroding in the United States, or has eroded, or is almost gone, actually.
Yeah. No. I mean, I appreciate the tangent, man. I mean, the floor is yours on this, and like I said, I want to share your story. So, and again, we see a lot of parallels in what you did and what you're doing now. I want to take a shift real quick too and talk about mental health, which is obviously a major issue in the service, and as people are finally shedding some light on, it's a big issue in the construction industry as well. So if you've had some people that are maybe listening that are going through some stuff in the service or in the industry, what would you say? Because I know this is a big part of your personal mission in making people their best. What would you say to try to encourage that person?
Well, the first thing I would like to say is um, that if you're experiencing struggles with your mental health, it doesn't mean you're weak. I mean, I'm a Green Beret, and I'm going to be the first to tell you that identifying the fact that you have some mental health struggles, meaning you're not yourself or you're just not right, and you're not exactly sure how to fix it. Well, you don't have to have all the answers. So, you don't, right? So that's why there are professionals out there. And this is not the same as it was, back in 2002 or post Vietnam. I think it's a lot more widely accepted that's just something that service members experience and have experienced for a number of different reasons. And so identifying it and understanding it's not weak to identify it. That's one point. Two, seeking help. Because you're just not equipped. And I'm a guy that has almost a dozen LOSs, and I had to realize that I didn't have an answer on how to deal with some of the mental health stuff. So I did something called EMDR, which is phenomenal for getting through certain traumas. And I've had a whole lifetime of trauma. I mean, I was abused when I was a kid too. So, um, but so anyway, and that you're not broken, right? There's broken, and when I say broken, I mean obviously, you may not be thinking the same way, or your mental health not may be as resilient as it was before, or as positive, or things like that. But it's fixable, and if you partner with someone, they can make you pretty much whole. But you have to be open about it, and you have to be willing to try something new and different. And you have to understand that those that seek help and get on a mission to get better, that's a true sign of strength. But if you keep it to yourself and you stay private about it or deny it, then it's just going to get worse. It's like a slow poison, right? So once it doesn't get fixed, it just gets worse and worse and worse, and we don't realize it because our perception starts to kind of get skewed. And so I tell people, hey, seek that help and understand there are people out there that have experienced similar things to you, that have sought help and that have gotten better and leading awesome lives and have taken that trauma and used it to help other people. So I don't know, does that work, Scott?
Yeah, man, very well said. And that's kind of a good segue too into. I want to talk about some of the work you're doing outside of the consulting. Can you share a little bit about your personal work that you're doing with people?
Yeah. So there's so I went through a very deep personal struggle. I mean, I've actually been through a lot. If I was a cat, I probably would have used up all 9 of my lives. Um, but that whole situation when I was training athletes for a living in California, and oh, by the way, my career was starting to really pick up. I was writing articles. I was about to be picked up by a major magazine, and um, yeah, I mean that career was doing pretty well. So when I got hurt, and then had this surgery that went poorly, that led to three 4 surgeries in 3 states and 3 years of physical therapy. Uh, and at the age of 43, by the way, I was in the best shape of my life. This happened when I was 43. And I was right handed for 43 years. And I had to transition to be left handed. And my wife had to feed me, by the way, and dress me for a couple months because I couldn't do any of that stuff and all that. But anyway, so I went through some of that. Just that's actually, I guess, ties into what we just talked about, which is the mental health thing. Because at that moment, at that time, that was such a massive shift in my life that I did get depressed. And interestingly enough, I never had really any PTSD, Scott. From all the combat, and I used to get shot. I got shot at in South America, too, in Colombia before 9/11 happened. Um, and that's probably because I grew up in the inner city, and I got stabbed a few times, and I saw my first homicide when I was 16. So, when people would ask, how could you not have any PTSD from being over there in Iraq and Afghanistan? I'm like, I have no idea. Maybe it's because I was exposed to trauma earlier in my life, and it just I got used to it. I don't really know. So after this thing happened in 2015, and I was faced with not being able to use my right hand, and even though I'm educated and I'm relatively smart, my identity was always based in my physicality, centered in my physicality, and so I was questioning, what does it mean to be a man, and was I going to be a man anymore? Could I protect my family, and could I do any of this other stuff? And so as I did that, I came to this revelation that being a man, it's not based upon how fast you run, how strong you are, how well you can shoot. Um, it's based upon your character. And so I wrote down, what are the characters of a true man? And it just so happened I wrote down 13 of them, and I redefined them. And 13, by the way, is my favorite number. I didn't do that on purpose. That's just when I got done writing, I was like, oh my gosh. And, and it's integrity is the number one of those character traits. And I reframed them, meaning I gave 3 different definitions to each of these, and that courage is one, and there are all these that I felt like, well, this is a mark of a true man. And so from that point forward, I endeavored to share that with other men, because I could see that there's this slow erosion of the definition of what it means to be a man. We've seen it. It's been a slow thing that's happened over decades, TV, movies, positions, and all these things. And so, we're lacking in the United States of 2 things: the whole concept of family, and the um, the definition of what it means to be a man or a father. And so I share these with guys, and I change their perspective, and I now have metaphors, because my wife and I, we went through this really tough period as well. Right after I came back from the Middle East, I was over there for 5.5 years, and um, it was rough, and it almost broke my marriage apart. And we went through what we call 5 years of marriage combat after that, but we made it. And now reflected back, or even, when I was going through this whole thing in 2015, 16, 17, I would reflect back on that time, and I just had all these revelations of these really cool examples that I didn't have then in the middle of that combat with my wife, where I just thought she was crazy and I didn't understand, what the heck was going on with her. I go back, I think back, and I'm like, oh my gosh, man. Okay, now I can relate that. So with that said, I have this thing. It's an ebook. It's called the 13 Codes. I think 15 or 15 to 20,000 people have downloaded it over the years. But again, I at that time didn't have the right people to support me, and so I spent a lot of money and put a lot of effort, and I had a great Facebook presence and did this other thing, but it just in the end it wasn't paying my bills, and I was still going through a lot of other stuff, so I had to put that on pause for a little bit. But I created something called the FIP, and so what I've really been good at doing is taking the things I learned in the military, in like military planning, which I use in the last planner system in lean construction. Um, but I've also helped men with their relationships. Um, I've helped some people not get divorced. I've helped some people improve their relationship, improve their relationship with their children. And I developed this thing. When you're in special operations, if you have a target, you're given a tip, like a target intelligence packet. And in the packet, it talks about all this different stuff, about this is the target, this is where they eat on this day, and this is where they get their haircut, and this and that, right? And we take that tip and we develop our plan, and you determine, okay, when and where are we going to take the target out? And I took that and I turned it into a FIP, a female intelligence packet. And I would talk to guys about how to gather either intelligence on their spouse in a covert or an overt way. But the bottom line is, part of the reason why your relationship is losing traction and it's not very good is because you don't really understand your significant other. And a lot of people argue, and then I say, well, let me ask you a couple questions. And real quick, do you know what the acronym PACE stands for, Scott?
I don't offhand, but I'm real quick. I'm on the website signing up for the packet as we speak. I'm listening to you, but and for those who don't know, it's the moderndaynight.com. But so what is PACE?
So PACE was originally developed for communications, and I looked high and low on that exactly where it started. And I think it was in Vietnam, but it may have been during the OSS days. But anyway, it was for communication. So it stands for primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency, right? And it's basically for communications on the move or in the field or in combat situations or whatever. You If you don't have communications, you don't get support, you don't get food, you don't get ammo, you don't intelligence, you don't get that stuff. And so they developed this like, all right, we have to have four methods of communication. We have to have some backup ones, some contingency ones. And so they created this so that, like for example, um, normal field radios, they're really heavy and their batteries are really heavy and they don't carry they don't have a lot of power, meaning it's not like it's a battery that lasts for 15 hours, like iPhones and things like that, right? And so you carry this big radio in the jungle or something like that. There's only so many batteries you can carry with you, and if you drop one, you break it. And so they're like, okay, we need another form of communication. So then you might have a smaller handheld radio that was more like a line of sight type of radio, right? And then you had Morse code, which if you couldn't have voice communication, then the bandwidth you would need wouldn't be nearly as much for Morse code. And then, we'd also carry 100 feet of wire and 100 feet of 550 cord. And then you'd get a plastic spoon out of MRE and you'd cut 3 6-foot sticks and you put them together in a triangle and you'd hoist this up, and it's called a jungle antenna. And man, you would be blown away at the communications you could get. Now, if there's combo guys out there and there's 18 echoes out there, and please don't slay me because I didn't describe it all. I mean, it's been a long time, and I did it a couple times earlier in my career. So if I got some details wrong, I'm not claiming to be the expert. I just, you know what I mean? So I don't want someone to come back. But anyway, generally speaking, I think I got that concept right. I've done it a few times, many years ago, and it was really cool. So when I learned that PACE, I learned it in SF, we pretty much operate on PACE for everything. So if we had to plan a mission, not just commo, but okay, what's the primary way, we're going to hit this target? What's the primary? Oh, on a Monday at 8:00 while he's getting his haircut. And then if that didn't work, we'd immediately flow to another plan. We'd have to go back to the drawing board, take another couple of days to figure it out. We will have already figured out 4 courses of action based on different criteria. And then we could just fluidly execute those things, right? And so I've taken that PACE and I took it to the FIP, and I also bring it to LPS, but I tell guys, okay, what's your wife's favorite flower? Most of the time, they're not 100% sure. They just assume it's a rose. And so they'll be like, a rose. I said, do you know that for a fact, or are you just assuming because you think all women like roses? And they're like, well, my wife loves roses. I said, have you ever asked her? She said, she told you? And sometimes they're like, well, I'm like, because my wife doesn't like roses. And then the second favorite flower, she's like carnations. And so I'm like, what's your wife's second favorite flower? I'm like, why? I don't know. And then we say something or say carnations. And I'm like, do you know that for a fact, or are you just assuming? And they're like, well, what does it matter? I mean, if I just buy her roses, I'm like, what if they're sold out of the roses? What's your wife's favorite color? What's your second favorite color? And I ask all these questions. And usually then they're like, I don't know. I guess not. I'm like, see. So if you don't know those facts, what's her favorite meal? What's her favorite thing to do? What's her love language? Then the way that you're interacting and communicating with your spouse may be way off, man. You may be sending these subconscious messages that you don't really care. Now, I'm going to caveat this by saying I haven't mastered this myself, Scott. So, it's still a fluid thing, and sometimes these things change. But nonetheless, when you get to know your significant other to that detail, then your ability to communicate more effectively or more empathetically becomes better. And then other things just get better, right? Their perception that whether you care or not, it just gets better because you're making these slight adjustments and changes. And so anyway, I really like doing that. That's what I like to do. I'll also ask guys about their integrity, and it's cool. I personally, in my lifetime, have spent probably $100,000 in personal development. I mean, I've been to Tony Robbins. I've been, you know, but the problem with that is a lot of people don't walk away with actual tools to implement from that $4,000 they spent in those 4 days. They're just motivated for a couple days or a couple weeks. And they feel really good, and then they say they can do that. They don't really walk away with tools. And so I try to provide these guys with tools, and I tell them, look, if you just change the way you operated on a daily basis and focused on character traits like these 13 codes, and I'm like, there can be 12, you could pick different ones, and they don't have to be the 13 that I've picked. You would magically see your life significantly change. And if we have time or there's interest, then I can give an example of the integrity thing at, during a podcast, or we can do another one, but it's usually eye-opening for most guys.
Yeah, no, I love this, and kind of liken it to the industry. I'm not going to go ask the trade foreman his favorite flower, but there's a lot of power in getting to know your people too.
Yes.
I've heard people talk about like knowing people on a first name basis. That holds a lot of power to it. I try to make it a point to shake hands with the guys on the job site every morning. Just reaching out and saying good morning or how are your kids, and people really appreciate that. Like I take a genuine interest in you as a person before I do. Like I'll give you a quick example. I have a guy on my job site that he's had some heart issues and he just went to the hospital, and I just sent him a text checking in on him. How you doing? And I can't prove this maybe, but I'm pretty sure I'm probably one of the few people that actually checked in on him from the site because I genuinely care about these guys.
Yeah.
These are my now brothers in arms here in the construction industry, but no, I'm loving all this stuff, and I'm going through your site as we're talking about this. And I don't care how good your marriage is. I mean, it can always improve, right? So this is all good stuff.
For sure.
No, it's good, man. And I appreciate you sharing all that. And it's themoderndayknight.com for people who don't know. And I love that female intelligence packet. But I appreciate you admitting the fact that you don't have it all figured out yet. I don't think any of us will. Any man will, but you're doing a good effort for sure.
It's a constant thing. And I just want to clarify, by the way, a couple of years ago, because I stopped like updating my website and this and that because I was, doing some other stuff. There's another company that took that name and they call it the Modern Day Night Project, and they did it in like 2019. So if people type in the modern day, if they don't actually type in www.themoderndayknight.com, then they may come up with MDK, which is Modern Day Night without the in front of it. And that's another group that does some other stuff in California. So
yeah. Well, and I would say, so I started a nonprofit last year, and we're still slowly getting it up and running. There's never enough organizations like this to help you improve yourself and your relationships, whether it's your marriage or at work. So I appreciate what you're doing. So that's like you said, themoderndayknight.com. And I'm on here. So as soon as we get off the call, man, you're going to see a charge go through. I'm buying it.
Okay. All right.
No, I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, for sure.
So sort of in closing, so if we've got folks that are transitioning out, maybe not from a special operations background, maybe they are. We need people bad in this industry. I mean, there's all kinds of posts out there talking about all these people that are going to be retiring. We need tradespeople. We need people in project management, superintendents, consultants, all that. If I'm in that position, what would you say to me to encourage me to give it a chance?
Um, well, I think that if it's not one of those options that you'd be considering, like you said, there's a huge, huge room for growth, and there's a great need. I mean, I was just at um, the Lean Congress um, conference in San Diego last week, and man, I think they said that currently across the country there's a shortage of like 685,000 construction positions for all these projects that are up and running. So they're running under full strength. And so, I mean, someone that's transitioning out of the military, you may not have, or you may not think that you have a direct skill that translates. But what I will say is that if you've been in the military for any number of years and you know what it's like to show up on time and you know what it's like to take orders, to be part of a team, and if you've also been in a leadership position, a squad leader, a platoon sergeant, or any of those, then the industry definitely really needs people with that experience because you can learn how to, swing a hammer or operate a concrete truck or other things like that. So those other skills make it make you a valuable asset, right? So that discipline and schedule and planning and all those things make military members a valuable asset that could they come into the industry and there's a number of different positions that they can fill and it pays really really well actually and so there's a shortage. You have a skill set and skills and experience that could be used in the industry and it pays well and there's longevity in it. So even in recessions there's people that are they're still building things and stuff like that. So
Yeah, sort of seems like a no-brainer, right?
yeah, for sure.
Well, cool, Bill. Man, I really appreciate it. This was really cool to get to know you and to hear your story. And I'm sure this won't be the last time we chat, man.
Well, thank you for having me on your show, Scott. I appreciate it tremendously. Thank you for allowing me an opportunity to share that story. And I definitely look forward to um, not only watching the industry grow, but um, cultivating this relationship with you and doing the best I can to just be a contributing member of society.
Outstanding. I appreciate it, Bill. Thanks, man.
Yep. Thank you. Have a great evening.